noble and honourable and venerable club. I tell some people it's the Duke of Edinburgh retired, but in fact, it was the unfortunate death last year of my very good. Oh! One, two, three, testing. Having done an hour without a microphone, this will have my voice now in. As I said, the previous patron was John Nelson, who'd been service manager and experimental plots and lots of things. He died in his early 90s, leaving behind his dear wife, who he met when he was 4. There's just one story before I move on about John. He, 1946, he's just been demobbed from the army, and he's walking along in the town with his dear wife and comes to a Triumph showroom. And in the front window there's a 5T, I think, in the amaranth red, we used to call hammer and thread, that lovely deep red colour. And he said to his wife, "That motorbike's the same colour as your coat. This must be an omen. I'll write to the factory and try and get a job." So somehow he managed to get an interview with the legendary Edward Turner. And Edward said, "Well, what were you doing in the war?" He said, "Well, latterly, I was in the Middle East and logistics, and I was looking after a so-and-so bridge." So Edward Turner said, "That's amazing. In World War I was in charge of building that bridge." So that's how he got the job. I thought that was just amazing. Right, so, if I get myself organised, thing is with the microphone, I now need 3 hands. I hope I'm not going to be anybody's way when I stand here-ish. Yeah, nice videos in the back of my head by the looks of it. Again, maybe better if I stood over the side. Let's start over the side. Sorry, I was up there before because there was no bloody microphone. Right. So, I think some people know that I did the sidecar lane speed record, but of course, thank you. I started off on 3 wheels at a very early age. There I am in 1948 on my first 3-wheeler, and as you can see, I was very early into this trendy cross-dressing and transgender stuff, which I think is probably going to be compulsory very soon. Latterly, just looking at the front light there, when I just left school, I bought 2 500 AJSs, one for a £5 and one for £2.10, and I used to ride from Warwick to Birmingham through the winter with one of those on the front and one of those round bullet ones on the back. I used to steal off my mother's push bike. I don't think you do 100 yards today before being arrested. Right, but I moved on to 2 wheels for not too long, and the latest high-waisted trousers and Clark shoes, and I'm not quite sure what's on my head, whether it's an early crash helmet, but I don't think I've got any Jewish ancestors, but I'm not quite sure what that's about, but that was the bantam. But then I learned to ride through the RAC ACU training scheme, which was brilliant, with 12 Sunday mornings out on the road, and 12 Monday nights being taught about how engines and gearboxes work. Anyway, that's how we ended up. That's at Mallory Park. Had a feeling, and then we all had 350s apart from the guy on the left who had a sports Cub. That 200 was just as fast as all the 350s. My dear wife at the front here has now been married 51 years, so she's put up with me for a long time. Right, so then moving on to, there's the track, engine. So remember, we were making 1,000 bikes a week with 1,700 workers. That's a picture, I think, from the early 70s, straight ahead, etc. There were, at 90 degrees, lines where the sub-assemblies were done, so the guy would be fitting, he'd pick up the cylinder head, pre-assemble, put it on, and similarly gear clusters and built up outer column things, clutches and stuff, all fed into that. But of course we were doing things like the crankcases. We'd have like the aluminium section. If you can imagine the factory stacks the crankcase halves up to here, and a guy would put one down, probably drill some holes, and then put it back, and then the next guy on the other side would pick one off and maybe tap some holes, and the crankcases would all sort of move along. The guy with the hardest job, there's an old boy there called Jack Rutherford, who used to put the barrels on. Well, T120 cast iron barrel is very weighty. The piston rings at the time were Hepworth and Grandage 10, HG10, which were very brittle, and he had to, in his arm, nurture 200 barrels a day with breaking the rings. Pretty spectacular. And he used to have a bit of velvet, which he used to anti-static wipe the pistons and rings around to make sure there was no metal cap. And then every Friday afternoon, this bit of velvet had to be washed and wrung out and hung up to dry over the weekend. Right. So that's the engine side of things. Then of course the tracks where the bikes were built. Now of course, one of the big things that's changed over the years, we had to make all the bikes the same because, you know, mass production, you had to keep making the same things for economy reasons. And I mean, for example, if you've got say a cylinder barrel that wanted 8 or 12 holes in the top, you'd have a big machine, the big cast iron gearbox with 12 or that, the drill sticking down, big handle, and the guy would wind it down to a stop, back up, and then the barrel would move along to it. That's not a similar thing where they're all the time. And now, of course, with modern CNC machining at the speed of light, an arm will pick up one drill, fill the hole, put it back, put it up. Totally different. So whereas all our bikes were the same, when you go to Hinckley now, there's hardly two the same going down because you can make to order, make small runs so much easier. So we were making most things in-house. So for the engines, we would make the pistons, and of course pistons are complicated shape. While the piston ring area is around, looking from above, the piston is elliptical, so you've got more clearance at the sides. And looking from the side of the piston, front to back, they're either parallel to the bottom at an angle or barreled in. Which is why you can't check your clearance with the feeler gauge at the top. Complicated things, they're all made in-house, with the camshaft, the gears, all sorts of things. And of course there were, as an apprentice there, I worked in all the departments around rough stores and progress chasing. We worked, yes, just as how things have changed for Hinckley, when you worked in the progress office, you were obliged to wear a suit and tie in the week. Saturday morning, which was part of normal work, you could wear a tweed sports jacket. Hey! But then another place I worked, polishing and plating. Trump was very proud, I'm sure it is now, of his chrome plating. But to give you an idea, I mean, when you think how much you've got to do to chrome plate 2,000 wheel rims a week, to make several thousand, you know, mud guards, handlebars, it's all done there. And of course these days you get things a lot more mechanised, and the polishing wheels then came as blank, so there were layers of cotton, and you had a bit stuck with one hand here, but quite long, narrow wooden boxes that were full of the different levels of grip that you wanted, and there were little stoves on gas burners full of glue, and you had to roll the glue round and then roll the wheel down these narrow wooden boxes to get all the glue on the outside of the wheel. So you can go 2,000 wheel rooms a week and do one of those over your shoulder. Tricky job. And then, of course, when you get to this stage, there's a string of workers building the wheels. They're mainly ladies, actually. Again, tricky job. Make sure that they've got them properly laced. Start off with a rim and a band on the spoke, not an easy job. Then, of course, somebody had to fit 2,000 tyres, and of course the rear wheel had 2 security bolts, which makes life quite difficult, and everything's piecework. One of the things that used to make me smile, I don't know what Hinkley do now, but everything was drawn immaculately, but the one thing that gave us a problem was exhaust pipes, because different patches of steel, you can bend it to the right amount on the bending machine, but will spring back different amounts. So sometimes as a seller of aftermarket exhaust pipes, I have somebody on the phone saying, well, the standard pipe I've taken off fitted perfectly, whereas yours isn't quite that good. Well, if you were at the factory, you would have seen the guys on piecework putting the exhaust pipe on the head, and then if it wasn't quite in the right place, they had a fork stanchion, and one guy would pull it up as hard as he could, and somebody with a wooden mallet would belt hell out of it until it fitted. I said, you might have to do that sort of thing yourself, sir. Well, of course, one of them was the tried and edges, although some of the bits, like the conrods, camshaft were made at Meriden, the engines largely were built and all assembled at BSA, which meant that when the workers' cooperatives came along, they couldn't sit in and they couldn't start making triples. Right. So in 1971, we moved on to an all-welded frame. Because up to this time, all the junctions were brass-sweated, malleable iron lugs. And this came along because we had Umberslade Hall, which was staffed by a lot of very bright people who had no idea about motorbikes. I haven't mentioned my old boss, Doug Heel, who's a stunning man. But just to give you an example, swinging arms at the top of these sort of bikes are very basic, aren't they? A little cross tube, 2 arms. And this character, Dr. Bauer, who come to us from the atomic industry, I remember him coming into the experimental one day, holding this swinging arm that didn't look any different than else. He said, no, this is the world's first computer-designed swinging arm. So Doug looked at it, put the cross tube in a vice, clamped it up with 2 arms sticking up, and then went and walked away. The big top tube was supposed to hold oil all the way with a filler in front of the petrol tank. But before production, they had a panic because they realised that when you, not that you could brake very hard with the conical or comical brakes that we had at the time, but the oil could flash forward and cause problems. So they had a quick panic and put the filler to the front of the seat, so reducing substantially the amount of oil that you were carrying, which is good for people selling oil cooled kits. Right. That's the great man, Doug Heel. So clever at all levels, got patents to his name, but could roll his sleeves up and work on metal. Never wrong. I mean, I had to wage him 10p. He could, if he just picked something up and say, I think that's 5.6 inches long. He measured by eye to 10,000. I used to take wages with him, always lose. And he was meticulous, would never give in. His triumphs, he thought about things 24 hours a day. He used to have a notepad by his bed, and he would be thinking. I mean, I remember one day he was saying, I was doing the washing up last night, and I watched the water go down a plug hole, and I had an idea for a bell mast. He's always on the case. I mean, he knew what all the fitters were doing. I mean, he was so enthusiastic. He'd always ride to work on a bike. As he'd take part of his kit off, he would then go to a fitter and say something new and exciting, till he got caught one day running around with his shirt tails flapping and no trousers on by the proper secretary. Then that had to sort of stop. But mega keen. I'll talk some more about it. There he is on one of his early bikes. That's the experimental department, as it was. Dithering. So you've got it, that's wind up bike stands. Interestingly enough, although we're working on engines all the time, we never had clever things like engine stands. It's always just a clamp the front mounting in the bike. That's the form of the bike, a couple of production bikes at the back. The doors are 2 of the 3 test cells, which I'll show you a picture of later. I spent many happy hours in those. So we would have about a dozen fitters of different abilities. This is 3 guys I'm racing over the highest level. 3 guys that you could give, you turn up with a box of bits of metal, a sheet of drawings, and say, put this together, and they would know about the fits and tolerances, whether the draftsman made a mistake, whether the tool room and machine did wrong, what was what. Highest level, and used for racing. We never had any silly mistakes or problems. At the other end, 2 testers would typically be doing 200 miles a day, and rear tyres did 600 miles and rear chains, so there's a lot of work done changing those, and checking tappets and timing, all those sort of things. But we'd have maybe sort of up to 50 standard bikes floating around, lots of experiments, because obviously when we had new ideas coming in from the official system to the drawing office, we have unofficial ideas of our own, and then we'd have companies, because we were a successful company, because Coventry was the highest paid city in England, and Triumph was the highest paid place in Coventry. Up till 1971, there was never any stock. Over 80% of bikes used to go to America. And so lots of things going on. A lot of companies wanted us to fit their products, so we have products come in, and people like myself would have to say, that's rubbish, chuck in the bin, put it on the going home bike, so I typically ride bike every day. I'll assess it on the way home, or it might go into one of the test beds if it's a longer term, different cam profiles, or different carburetor size or whatever. And then we have rigs where we have something simple like a on-off petrol tap. We have a little electric motor and a rig, turning the lever on and off. Still didn't stop us going from those nice brass tapered petrol tap to a great plastic one. And then, of course, a lot of testing was done at MIRA, Motor Industry Research Association. It's a great place, big triangular track where at one time Percy Tate had a lap record around there. And the testers, I mean, you had twin 1 mile straights, it's like a dual carriageway, arm coat in the middle. In fact, I'll tell you a story about that. One day, because it's different to being out on the road, and I was doing some oil cooler tests on a Trident, and I had to ride flat out, so we've got twin 1 mile straights and then big circle, back again. So I've just got my head down, doing steady 115, I'm flat out on a triple, and look up, and the road is higher than the surroundings, and there's a tipper lorry across one and a half of the two lanes. With something, and a bloke standing with the front of the lorry in the arm show. So I'm not sure who was more surprised when I went sort of between him and the lorry at 115. So that's what it, and of course the testers you'd have, because we'd have Triumph, BSA and Norton testers, and they do daft things like, you know, going down the straight and then trying to see who could break the latest without going off the circuit. They used to be on the corners, empty 45-gallon oil drums, and they used to get shunted by back wheel until one day the authorities decided to fill one full of concrete, which resulted in one tester getting a broken leg. And you'd have daft things like if you're doing 100 miles an hour, and something like Percy Kay to come up and pinch your backside while you're doing 100 miles an hour, which when you didn't see him coming was quite a shock. And there were different surfaces, hills and things, Belgian pave, where of course the BSA, when the first gas shocks came out, mixing gas and oil and compression, units did explode, which wasn't much fun. So lots of different testing going on, whether it was bikes or whatever. Right, yeah, so there were typically about a dozen fitters, a charge hand, who was generally, for many years, the great Les Williams, and then a foreman, and then two development engineers, which I was one. Then Doug Hill was the chief development engineer, Brian Jones the chief designer, and above those the legendary Bert Hopwood, who designed Norton, BSA twins, etc. Such a different world, a very short family tree. So I mean, I commonly would sit having a coffee with Doug and Bert Hopwood on the main board of BSA Group, which was about 50 companies. I say, well, hi, what do you think about petrified to speak type thing? And Bert Hopwood had worked with Doug Hill for 30 years, never ever called him Doug, once. It was always Mr. Hill. He was a very Victorian sort of guy, but had a sense of humour. Right, and aside from the experimental was the competition shop, top shops, where we used to prepare the works, Tiger Cubs. I worked in there as an apprentice for a while. And they were very, very common, big sales. So they had a big trial with 200 entries, typically half of them would be on Tiger Cubs. But we also used to do the international 6 days trial, and we used to get gold medals all the time. And this is from a shop with 2 blokes. So you might recognise 1 or 2 faces here. The guy on the left is Johnny Giles. If any of you are old enough to remember the scrambling on the BBC before he came back across, he used to do well on a Triumph, and I believe he was still riding off-road till he was pushing 80. Roy Peplow, Ray Sayer, Ken Higgins was a big Triumph dealer, and we had a range of bikes with different categories. So Ray would normally ride the 350, then the 490, a 504, and possibly a 650. And so watching these guys practice, you remember 6 days top, he was riding flat out through mud and crap for 6 days. And somewhere on the line, a little man going to jump out from behind a hedge and he'd say, "Show me your rear inner tube." Remember, you've got 2 security bolts, etc. And you're mud and sweaty and eager to get off. Throw the bike down, pull the spindle out, the wheel out, get the tyre off, hold the tube up, put it all back in. I used to watch the guys practicing, and they could do that from stopping the bike to getting back on it in 4 minutes, which was absolutely terrific. So we used to get gold medals every year. At the back is the Americans. You might recognise a couple of faces there. We've got Bud Eakin with the triumph shirt on, and next to him, Steve McQueen. I think we were old enough. And interestingly enough, when I was doing my book, which I shall hope to sell a couple in a minute, that's me, age 19, as an apprentice. I was involved with my local Leamington Club's grass track. I asked if I could borrow a bike for the weekend. And I only found this picture when I was doing the book. I hadn't looked at this picture for 40 years. And I thought, I'm sure when I asked to borrow that bike, somebody said, be careful, it's McQueen's bike. So I put that number into Google, and what did I find? There he is. You can see the pressurised gas cylinder at the back for when they're doing the rear tyre malarkey. Yeah, so and the other thing I then remembered was when I was riding this back to the factory on Monday morning, at the time I was involved with sprinting a Tiger Cub, which I bought for a tenner. And I've got a pair of Cub flywheels up my barber jacket. And when I got to the factory, I was mortified to find scratches on the top of this lovely red petrol tank. And oh my God, Steve McQueen petrol tank. This is probably very different to what happens at Hinkley now. Oh, don't worry about that kid, we'll stick another tank on it. Which of course then made me realise, because of course many of us at the factory had Triumphs. And of course we had staff discounts, but if something was damaged, you could buy it very cheaply. So the sort of things that used to happen was somebody who was riding that I really wanted a new petrol tank for my Bonneville. Have you got any damaged ones? What colour do you want, kid? You know, a red one. No, we haven't, but we'll scratch one for you. Right. So, as well as all the sort of testing we were doing on standard bikes, we did get into racing. Now, of course, the 221 or 3TA, designed by Edward Turner, as a 350 gauge, 18 horsepower, and a lot of work later, we got 54 horsepower out of the 500. A lot of work. That's a very early one. He's got like standard front brake, Grand Prix carbs, and it moved on. That's Buddy Elmore winning the 66 Daytona when we were racing against Harley Davidson 750 side valve. Still got to be won. And that's on the grass outside the factory. That's a slightly later one. Front brake. Shows us we used to stand these things to stick the thing up to the bottom of the frame tube. Moved on again. That's an even later version taken outside the factory. That's the great Ray Pickrell. Wonderful guy. Back in '66 we entered Ray and Paul Smart. It was a bit of a wangle in the Manx Grand Prix, which is basically for amateurs, and both the bikes broke down, which was very distressing. But it was a practice for the following year's Daytona, which of course eventually we won. Ray was a great guy, no longer with us, I'm afraid. And that's Nixon winning Daytona. So many things had to change the racing reasons. We upgraded the material of the crank a couple of times, beefed up the conrods, redesigned the cylinder head, had an alloy clutch. There were a lot of parts that were non-standard. And of course we were out most weekends. That's the legendary Percy Tate. He still going. He started racing in the 40s on a 250 Triumph, sponsored by a local Triumph dealer. We're out most weekends at Cudwell and Alton and Mallory, all these little places. And there's some really tough guys there, lots of elbow bashing and things going on. I'm sure it won't happen today. That's Percy on the first prototype Thruxton. You can see it's still got the original UK market silencers on it, but obviously it got the work done in the motor. There's that's a slightly later one. That's Darrell Pendlebury, who was also a tester at the factory. That's got the more recognisable Thruxton silencers. They had the front part is like a megaphone, so there's a reverse cone inside, and a parallel piece, another reverse cone, and straight out. There's nothing in there at all. They were great things. Some down there. Now that's the launch. That's the launch of the Thruxton. And you can see the factory was into big twins. It's not quite put across the way that we all think of when we see a Thruxton. Sorry. But that's how the factory saw the Thruxton. And still advertising the Tina. Anybody remember Tinas? They had an automatic drive, and there's a safety feature. There was a button in the seat, so that if you could flip the throttle while you weren't sitting down, it wouldn't go. So that meant we used to use Tinas around the factory for transport. That gave great fun because you'd rev the thing absolutely flat out and then jump on the seat. Do a wheelie on a Tina was fairly unusual. Oh, there's a nice little bike. That's the later 500 racers used an all-welded frame, courtesy of Ken Sprayson and Reynolds, right welding that, and that was the forerunner of the all-welded frame we used on the 350 Bandit. I'll go on to in a minute. That's a T120 engine shoehorned into a Bandit frame. And I did a lot of miles on that. Lovely little bike, a little bit small seat to put there, but a really nice bike. And of course, a good view of that. Beautiful. There's certain things that, particularly Jack Wick's designed, he was known as Edward Turner's pencil, and had a wonderful eye. All those lovely things that we think are super about the engine, etc. The shout Triumph, and of course the other thing is the shape of the silencer, which is now very, very difficult to make. They have to be made pressings, but that just as much as the engine, I think, shouts it's a Triumph. That's the first triple. That was called the P1. This was done around 1965. The first one. It had things like gear primary drive, and if Lord Hesketh had taken any notice of that, he wouldn't have done his gear drive, because the coefficient of expansion of aluminium means that the distance between the crank and the gearbox and clutch manshaft is going to move by about 100,000 from room temperature to operating temperature, so the gear teeth are going to be out of mesh, which is why the first Heskeths, when they were hot, sounded like banging dustbin lids together. So they timed all the gears up, and then they wind out the stuck pig when they were cold, and still rattled like hell when they were hot. This one, of course, is unusual. It's got a cast iron barrel, which was normal for the time, but again, the difference of thermal expansion of cast iron to aluminium, and I think a lot of cars at the same period had the same sort of problem, is through hot and cold, you keep shuffling the head gasket, a lot of head gasket problems, because the aluminium obviously moved more than the cast iron. Also, just on the back, behind the barrel and under the carburettor, what you can see there is a distributor, because this model, like the twins at the time, or a number of the twins at the time, had a distributor with a diagonal shaft and an oil pump at the bottom. So that was the forerunner of the Trident, of which we're celebrating 50 years. That's, and again, of course, we've got racing, because we did. That's Dave Croxford on one of our bikes. The silencer on these have got what's called reverse flow inside, which we stole from Velocet. And we could just race on standard silencers, they sound very good. I'm not going to go into all the racing results and things. There's a great Paul Smart, known at the factory as a small part. There he is on the island, doing great things. I was in charge of homologation because for production racing, and I'm sure these sort of things won't happen today, but of course we used to cheat. So the rules said you've got to have available 50 sets or 100 sets, whatever. So there was a lovely list printed out of things that the ordinary mortal couldn't get. But we had a problem because the engine was so close to the ground. So we had to get the rules altered from saying using a standard frame to using a standard type of frame. And that let us lift the engine up an inch and a quarter, which came into production with the T160. Then that's the BSA. We built just one production race of BSA. Raced in the 500 mile, etc. Because we supplied all the Marshall's bikes, which was very popular with the TT. Doug Hill, the guy in the middle, Ron Sparrow, was affectionately known as the Mole Strangler. The guy, they were all his babies. It was almost a full-time job for him to get the Marshall's bikes. And they'd be prepared for the same sort of standard as we would do with press test bikes. So, when you regular road tests of Tridents doing 125 miles an hour, then don't think that's how they would came off the track. There's a gang of Marshalls looking happy. There's me not looking happy. I asked if I could borrow the legendary Slippery Sam that had won a lot of TTs, never been dropped. Took it to Silverstone, 10,000 people, Woodcut, inside a Woodcut. I put 50 psi in the back tyre, got the biggest sprocket I could find. Les Williams, mechanic for me. Commentators getting excited. And here's Norman Hyde, here's the great Slippery Sam. Found it flat, waited till the tacho was saying 8, dropped the clutch. And of course, triple clutches are known, they yield, they don't go in with a bang. So it's sort of semi-gripped enough to lift the front wheel, then it fully gripped, letting smoke off the back tyre, which then went sideways. This is one of a series of pictures on page 3 of Motorcycle News. This was very embarrassing for my ego. When they rebuilt it, there it is. They rebuilt it after the fire, burnt at the museum, but they did tell me they were gracious enough to leave the dent in the oil tank that my knee left. There's one of the very first works, triple frames. The very first, again, not a known factor, but the very first of these frames happened when Percy Cate was racing a 650 twin. We upgraded it to a 750. Using a round barrel and some BSA pistons and rods, something I did. But the frame was just a standard frame. So Percy took an engine and some drawings to a guy who worked out of a shed with no door but tarpaulin inside the quarry, named Rob North. And he built something like that. Using very small seat tubes was quite revolutionary then, and when he did it, there was a third tube from the top of the dampers down to the main frame. One of the funny sides was, two of the first things, when Duck Heel came in 1962, Triumph had a very bad reputation for handling. And Doug got the grips with this straight away and altered the fork angle from 65 to 62 degrees. And those of you who've got the classic, I don't know, the main tube on a classic frame, which I think is 1.58 diameter, has the malleable iron lug across it with swing arms attached. And that's the only attachment of the swinging arm of the back wheel is into this 1.58 diameter tube. So when you're leaning over around a corner and it's bumpy, it's the twist in that tube. The only thing is trying to keep you in a straight line. So one of the very first things that Doug Hill did, realising that, was to extend the malleable iron lug across, put tapped hole in it, and come up with those black triangular plates that now join the engine to what we call the hockey stick, and attach the swinging arm lug to that. So now when you go around the corner, the loads are taken by the whole chassis. Really, those two things really transformed the reputation of Triumph for handling. That's Gary Nixon on one of their first bites. But yeah, just one funny aside, at the first match race, Nixon was riding this bike, and he's the one that demanded the head angles changed overnight, which was done, leaving the engine in the frame, leaving the whole bike, just taking the front end off, which worked well. But at the end of the year, Percy Tate came with me up to Elvington to see if I get some records, and got a British flying kilometre record, about 165 miles an hour. But of course, for records, you have to be led wild. And when it came time to take the cylinder head off this works bike, of course, there's scores of people wanting to look over each other to see what was in it. And up came the head, and the fins hit the head, and the cylinder head wouldn't come off because of the way the head angle had been altered. So Fred Swift, who was person mechanic, had to go and find a big rough bastard file, not mechanic, and file the ends off the fins to get the head off, which was, of course, a bit of fun. That's Percy. Of course, in America, he had to change his black leathers. It's the same reason that Dave Aldana came up with his famous leathers with the skeleton, the bones on. And that's Romero winning. And of course, one thing that's interesting is this fairing, and he qualified, I think, 165 round the top of the bowl. That was the fairing that we loved, that was our fairing. And now, every race trial that we see has got the letterbox fairing, which was pushed on us by Umberslade Hall, these guys who asked the question, does the fairing turn with the front wheel? And we always disliked it. But now it's the bit you recognise. You can tell a PR shot when you see one. Everybody's happy and smiling. That's working on one of the works bikes. And you can see the welds and all the exhaust pipes cut and shut by hand. And this is where Doug was so precise on what he wanted, and he would have the guys remake these things 3 or 4 times till he got the actual thing he wanted. And even the coils, I think there were 5 sets of coil mountings made, prototypes, before he was happy with rubber mounting. We never had any of our bikes retire with parts broken because of vibration. But before this time, it was not uncommon. That's the great Jack Shannon's, the top engine man. He'd been a spotter in the war for the planes and ships firing into occupied territory. His father worked at Triumph when, again, people probably know, Triumph used to enter cars in the Monte Carlo Rally. Going back a bit. That's the team. Lots of other people give the impression they were part of the team. That's us. You can probably recognise me. My pocket full of pencils. That's 71. We've gone on to disc brakes. Oh, so the discs that we were using were modified standard Triumph car ones. And in practice this year, Mike Hailwood fell off and broke a disc. So Doug rang Les Williams and said, we need a disc desperately urgently. So Les had to find his way to the Triumph factory as an unknown person on a Sunday morning, bluff his way through security, wander around an enormous factory to find a brake disc and get hold of one, and then rush it to the boss of the tool room and to get somebody in to machine it to spec so it could be posted to Daytona on Monday. There were things like that still happen. That's one of the very early letterbox bearings. And the big Daytona seat. There's some testing, that's back in the experimental. Checking out wind tunnel type stuff there. And one or two more of those. That's Dick Mann after winning 72. We all thought, we were hoping obviously that Paul Smart on a Triumph would win. He got the best engine, but he was running a compression ratio of 12.7 to 1, which was a bit over the top, and unfortunately didn't get to the end. There's a great Tony Jeffries. One of the greatest races ever, race of the year. Now, John Cooper wasn't part of our team. We had Paul Smart, Wade Pickrell, Tony Jeffries, Percy Tate. So Coop went over, he asked us and we said no, but he went to higher management and obviously he must have had something on somebody. We were told we got a supply on the bike and it ended up because of this stunning race. I mean, how many, 40,000 people there, something like that? And he beat Agostini. Absolutely stunning. Rode the wheels off it, and that meant that he could get to Ontario. And of course, Doug, just behind John there, had worked out in his meticulous way that he could just get to the end without refuelling. And that's because, of course, we're racing then against the two-stroke Yamahas, and they had to refuel. And because we didn't, Doug worked it all out. We had a win. That's one of the squish pistons and head. And of course the crucial thing is that the flat land on the outside of the piston just kisses, a full rent, just kisses the aluminium on the cylinder head, which then gives the gas the speed to go in and mix the mixture and give you your extra power. But of course they all have to be hand scraped, so you have a height gauge and a depth gauge, and about 8 places round measure the height and the depth, and then get a hand scraper out. This is what Chuck Shellings used to do, so that it would be exactly right all the way around. Great craftsmanship. This is one of the titanium rockets. This is an example of how meticulous Doug would. He never trust anybody, and he trusts himself. There was a decision to get some titanium rockers made. Because obviously, back and forward motion, if you can reduce weight on that, it's really good. And it was a hell of a job, as you can imagine, sending people off to, because titanium needs different temperatures and angles and things to steel, and then of course it's a Devilton machine. Anyway, this came through, and Doug, the rocker arms are here. So he clamped that in a vise, jumped up, stood on the bench, asked for a £1 hammer. He's working out in his head how many foot-pounds this is going to take, a big lumpy count, and hit it, and it cracked. It took 6 months to get to this stage. 6 months. And he jumped back and said, thank you, and walked off to the next job, leaving this domino effect, sack people, all the work in, but he just knew that he wasn't going to do the job. That's one of my better efforts. That's the Conrad I designed for the works triples, starting off with a 16-pound billet of the N24, coming down to just under £1. So we made a lot of swarf, which of course is one of the main products of British industry. And that was the same weight as an aluminium rod, but a lot tougher. Take it in all directions. Oh, and there's me, another of my efforts. The factory helped me out. We did the streamlining made by Don Woodward, who did all the aluminium petrol tanks and oil tanks. Great made. And when you think that's made from flat metal using no electricity, using a thing called an English wheel, with cardboard cut out with scissors, and that's me on the Concorde runway at Fairford with a supercharged 830 Trident engine, taking the world sidecar record at 162 miles an hour. That's what it looked like from the front. To have the sidecar chassis made cost me £1.10. Ball scooter tyre, and away we went really. The back, although I'd had a ride at Myra with the front half on, the back half had never been used before I did the record. It's held on with 4 quarter bolts, and that was it. And going into the wind, the front wheel was coming up at sort of 160 plus, which wasn't much fun. Right, anybody any idea who the gentleman on the right is? We've got 2 of the greatest names of British motorcycling there. The guy on the right is Phil Vincent. And Doug and he's out in the Bandit 350 cylinder head, which wasn't very good. That's the 2 of them with Brian Jones, the chief designer, in one of the test cells. Just to give you an idea, again, I'm sure health and safety would stop any of this stuff going on. Down in the cellar, there's about a 6-foot diameter fan, puts out 100 miles an hour wind, and out of the picture is its mate, which is up in the roof taking the gases out. So, again, out of the picture, this side is a guy just with a lever, like a choke lever, working the throttle and a handle to put the load on and off. And it could be very scary sometimes. I mean, when we were doing the 500 races, which were very fragile, I've been known to be standing in a 100-mile-an-hour blast astride the thing, tinkering with the carburettors when the engine's doing 8,000 or 9,000 RPM, which is slightly worrying because you rely on the guy working it. If he feels a little bit more vibration, he's got to shut it down in a split second before the thing explodes, because sometimes they did, and you have red hot pieces of metal flying around. Part of the fun games. But yes, we work, say, doing something like a Daytona race engine, the sort of stuff that's probably done by a computer in a second. If, say, you've got a new cam profile, you need to do the power curve to check it out with different valve timings, maybe different carb jets, maybe different carb sizes, exhaust pipe diameter and length, spark timing, all these different things that all interact together. And then, of course, it's reliant on the barometer being sensible. If the air pressure went down, it was all a waste of time. So I spent many happy hours of my life in those places. This is just showing, this is out of the Bandit, just showing how the original crank as done on the left. has that big flywheel in the middle, very much like a Bonneville in principle, and the later one moves the weight away from the centre some. I think they were so much smoother with that later crank. I think you could stand, those who remember threading bits, you could stand one of those on a tank up to about 5,000 revs using that. That's a promotional picture for Bandits. Right, then lastly we went to Kitts Green. That was a T160 we developed there. Electric start and left-hand gear and etc. etc. And of course we were working on the T180, which, you know, because I'd made bigger engines for myself to race with. We did a bigger motor, an 870, but of course the whole place folded up before that came into production. One of the, going back to dear old Les Williams, it was a great joker, and because electric starts were new to us. And I can remember when we had one of these in the doorway, and Les had taken a very long starter lead, about 30 yards back to his office, and he arranged it so that when one of the fitters walked past, the bike, petrol was on, the cars were tickled, the bike started, with nobody anywhere near it. So he ended up with this poor bloke on his knees, going like this with his hand. Every time he waved his hand, the engine started. Brilliant, absolutely brilliant. But yeah, we had lots. I mean, there were times, because with magneto, you know, you were afraid to touch anything metal in the workshop, because you tend to get 20,000 volts off the fingers. And but it was known for guys to tip mugs of hot tea over other people when they got electric shock, things of that sort of nature. I can remember him injecting somebody brought an orange into their lunch, and Les injected it with luminous green food dye. So when the guy opened this orange up and it's sort of throbbing green, chucked it away. Of course, Les took it and ate it. And there were, I mean, the experimenters used to have frosted glass up to about 8 feet so nobody could see in. And we're all there one day, and we look up, and there's a guy who must be 9 foot tall with the trilby hat, and he was laid on somebody else's shoulders. Yeah, I can talk for a long time about that. We did have a lot of fun. We had so much fun here, I've forgotten where I am. Right. Where are we? Yes, right, so we're on the latter days here. Yes, so that was T160. Then, of course, Nortons were taken over. And, of course, they thought Norton Commandos were wonderful. You could rubber mounted, bolting the swinging arm to the back of an engine, you rubber mounted with speedwork building. So what they made us build this, which we call the trice-elastic, you can see it on that. Which, of course, means altering major castings and lots of work. So, of course, Doug came up with rubber-mounted footrests, which the later T160s had, which did just as good a job of reducing the vibration, but didn't affect the handling at all in a bad way. Similarly, that's a Bandit frame with a 500 BSA single on, which was really quite a nice bike. Again, never happened. Now, that's a very interesting one. That's a Bonneville. Forget the crankcases don't look like it, but one of Doug's patents was a balancer where you've got an extra bearing conrod and a hollow piston and cylinder sticking out the front. And that was tremendous at solving all the vibration problems that Bonneville had. And unfortunately for the workers' cooperative, that was ridden out through the picket lines without them realising what they were letting go. If that had stayed in there, that could have totally altered the future for them. That eventually ended up with Joe, who's the boss of Andover Norton, who's now fitted into a Norton Commando, which is why that looked different. Well, that was a terrific thing. Then, of course, the Wankles around for years and years and years. In fact, I remember Les Williams sending the development engineer a birthday card when it was 21 years old. It had lots of problems. Generally, cooling the middle by taking the incoming air through was a total disaster, because when you stopped after a long run, the inside end got so bloody hot, you never knew when you were opening the throttle how much power you were going to get. That's the Easy Rider, that's Bob Trigger, Commando. I came along. I remember Dennis Paul personally riding it and complaining that it made his balls tingle. I was part of the team that rode one of those from John Groves to Land's End for Help for Heroes. Bloody hell, it was dangerous. We used to send novices out with 1 horsepower, no mirrors, no winkers. I remember coming down to a big, I was on a dual carriageway, and it was only doing 20 to 25 miles an hour. Dual carriageway, and the car's going past me at 80, I couldn't see, and I need to turn right at a traffic island with 3 lanes around. The cars are doing 60 around the island. And I just had to stick the right mitt out and wobble one, because when you go 20 miles an hour, what I'm going to do is very clever. Wobbling around this bloody island thinking, we are making progress with the new machines. There's another one I was involved with, which is the Rambler. That started off with trying to do a modern chassis, a little bike, and it was jolly good. Started off with an Italian Minarelli engine, but in production was a Yamaha. A single monoshock unit. But I had to test things like WSK from Poland. As part of it. But I remember this WSK had a square section frame. It was actually made of 2 bits of angle iron edge with all the way down. And it had sort of beam cams were great, terrific. That's my last trip out with the Great Doug. I had a 1,000 Rocket 3 sidecar outfit. We managed to touch 100 mile an hour a day, which was slightly worrying looking at the brakes, but there you are. So then, obviously after the factory went away, I did my own thing. That was sort of a take on that. Updated triple, and we did. I'm very pleased that we did the new Harrier frame based on the works frame, and dear Doug would never give a compliment unless he meant it. And he was impressed that got the engine a little further forward, and of course stiffened up. You know, when the original works frame was done, we were running 19-inch WM3 tyres, whereas as soon as wide tyres were able to come out, the steering head area needed to be much more braced, whole different game. Then I played around with a single-cylinder Hornet. Again, good fun. That was tested by Bike Magazine, 126 mile an hour, fastest single they'd done. Came out with my version of the Scrambler a year before the factory. I still think it looks good. And then that was a favourite, 50th anniversary, 10 years ago. Put the modern engine in, and that was a wonderful bike. You can easily spend billions of pounds on engine development. I set off with a 50 horsepower engine and increase the capacity a bit, put the compression ratio up a bit, bigger valves, stronger springs, designed a high lift camshaft, nice head job, smooth bore carbs, nice exhaust system, and motorcycle. I got the front 3 pages of motorcycle news with this, and they measured the back wheel horsepower at 83, which is a 67% increase. So I never bothered to alter it out, and that was a wonderful one. And that was commissioned by a chum of mine at the time, was the High Sheriff of Cambridgeshire, and my old head boy from school. We charge on. I'm now riding one of the latest 1200 Bonnevilles, which I've been riding standard triumphs for 50 years. This is the best standard bike for an old chap that I've ever ridden. Just great. So Meriden, that's all there is left. Anyway, I hope I've given you a bit of a flavour of how it was at the factory and the sort of things we got up to. So, and I shall be here with my books. Hope you enjoyed it. Thanks very much.
Yeah,